program. The Senate spends $15 million on that program. You're actually only really supposed to be negotiating about the difference between 5 and 15. You can go 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. You know, you go one extreme and in between, but you're not supposed to do 4 and you're not supposed to do 16. Really, under any circumstance, you're not really supposed to do that. Because there was no disagreement. The bodies spoke and they decided on it, and this is a matter of coming to a compromise about the differences that the two bodies have.
Those meetings public?
So that's an interesting thing. If they meet, it is public. They don't meet. What ends up happening is they informally meet amongst so under the Open Meetings Act, when you deal with a city council or county commissioners or really anybody but the legislature, they're subject to the Open Meetings Act, and they will get punished if they have what's called a walking quorum. What that means is, let's say the 7 of us were in a board meeting, and I come over here and I talk to you two, and then we get the 3 of us. No, that'd be 4. Anyway, so 3 of us talk, and then the 3 of us talk, and then we make a decision. And so because of that, we have, we actually got together. We had a quorum, but at any given time, there were only 3 of the 7, so there wasn't the 4 of the 7 required to make a quorum and have to call a meeting. That's illegal under the Open Meetings Act. Under the legislature was supposed to be under the Open Meetings Act, but there's a constitutional provision that says the members are allowed to create their own rules for their own process. And the courts have said, well, the rules override the statutes that is in place. And that actually makes sense. One legislature can't pass laws that then bind a subsequent legislature, in its operation. We wouldn't want that, but it is bad. You do have this act that says it applies to legislative committees, and it just doesn't. They frankly should get rid of it, at least for clarity in the law. Anyway, so what ends up happening with conference committees to some large extent, really what you end up having is the bill authors and the bill author and then the sponsor from the other house oftentimes get together, and the 2 of them privately hash out what they want to do, and then they go and get the agreement, oftentimes in one-on-one meetings with the other members of the conference committee, until you get the sufficient signatures, whether it's unanimous or if they really want to do something, they'll just get 3 of the 5 from each chamber to sign off. And as soon as you get 3 of the 5 from each chamber to sign off, then they can submit that to the House. And I can't remember, there's a little bit of notice, several hours of notice required before it can be brought up in the House. And actually I'm not sure about the notice required in the Senate. So there isn't really public meetings. There's some on the budget, but even those aren't necessarily comprehensive of everything that's done. And then on most bills, there's just no meeting. Because it would be difficult, they'd have to post it and do a lot of work and everything else if they met. They just don't meet. They get together and do that kind of walking quorum thing like we talked about. And so this is a really dangerous process because of the lack of transparency in it. Because of the tightened deadlines, what you will see is bills will enter, and I'll digress, bills will enter the conference committee and they come out in a very, very transformed way. And here's what they do. They are supposed to go to the body. If they want to, again, back to that example, this 5 million, 15 million, got to do in between. If they want to spend 20 or 25, they are supposed to go back to the body in each chamber and say, give me permission for us to discuss going beyond outside the bounds. It's called an outside the bounds resolution. What they end up doing is passing outside the bounds resolutions as forgiveness for the fact that they went outside the bounds. So they'll decide, we're going to go 25 million, and everyone in the conference committee will agree, and then they will go back to the chamber and they'll say, by the way, we went outside the bounds, give us permission now to do that. Well, it's not permission at that point, it's forgiveness, it's after the fact.
Do they always do that?
Yes. I mean, I've never seen them go, could change. David Simpson has been beating the drum about this issue for a little while, that we aren't following our rules. We're certainly not following the intent of our rules. The rules anticipate a tremendous amount of transparency on this process, with public meetings, with outside the bounds resolutions on the front end, and they just don't follow those. So to some extent, when you start complaining about things that everybody knows are wrong, you might get better behavior this time. I don't know. Out of some of the members, possibly not out of others, who knows? But they certainly don't really follow.
But there's really no recourse if you don't.
Yeah, so that's the reason why they do the outside the bounds resolution as forgiveness. Is, as you know, call a point of order. Bill has to. That's actually me. So as you know, when they come to the floor, the bill has to get to the floor in order to call the point of order. And you would have a point of order on a bill that went outside the bounds, but they cure it by passing the resolution right before they deal with the bill. And so what you'll actually see happen is they'll come forward with a bill, they'll come forward with an outside the bounds resolution. Literally no one will read the resolution. It'll get passed unanimously because whoever the conference committee chairman is will represent to the body what it is that's in there, which is not always accurate. And I'll give you an example from last session. But he'll represent what's in the resolution and what's been done in the bill, and everybody just kind of votes for it because, again, it's the same problem legislature. There's no way that guy could be lying to me, and I'm rude if I vote against the bill. I voted for it the first time, why wouldn't I vote for it now? It's really, really dangerous. Basically, we have, in many ways, we have this process that appears to have a full body engaged, 150 members, they all vote on it, they do all that. And then you're allowing essentially 5 members, or a lot of times they're so busy, they're not engaged. It's really just the bill's author is negotiating with the sponsor from the Senate. That's whatever they agree on. And if there's no real scrutiny of what those reports say, there's no, there's opportunity for a lot of mischief. And so what I need and what we all need what I need out of y'all, what we need out of everyone is to spend a little bit of time in those final few days as those conference committee reports are being posted online. Read them. Read them. It's super helpful to read them. I mean, the problem is you're looking at literally, and by read, I mean, you don't have to, there's a side-by-side analysis they do which shows, kind of highlighted where the differences are and then what was agreed upon. And so you actually can get a pretty good feel for just looking at the areas where there's something different, not just have to read through both versions of the bill and compare. There are some comparisons created by the attorneys on the project. But these things will come back with like handwritten notes on them and stuff. I mean, but we really need folks to be engaged in those final few days. Last session, the example that was most outrageous to me, there was a bill that had passed through the legislature, and I did not know at the time, this dealt with the Wallace Hall UT Law scandal situation.
This still goes on.
It still goes on. And there was a bill that was designed to, I think it's House Bill 12, could be 11, I think it was House Bill 12. Dan Flynn was the author of it. Came out of that select committee on transparency and the Orwellian named impeachment committee. They produced this bill, and at that time nobody really knew. If we knew now, if we knew then what we know now, everybody would have a microscope on this stuff, but we didn't. We didn't know what was coming. And so this bill moves forward, and it had to do with disclosing outside sources of income for people who are inside, working inside a state agency. And I was thinking, like, okay, I guess, I don't know, maybe there's some kind of grant from some foundation, and that's helping supplement some salary to state agency. It wasn't clear what it was talking about. But the bill was good. It was as filed and as passed through both chambers, it was good because it basically said, there was a way to disclose these things. There were certain facts that wouldn't be disclosed, but you'd at least see who was given the money. There'd be a report online for the public, who's given the money, who's receiving the money, just different stuff like that. It was not a great transparency bill, but it was it was at least a small step in the transparency direction. The bill goes into conference committee, and they decide to make all of this information filed with the state auditor's office, but it is confidential and can never be disclosed to the public. That was done in the conference committee, which reversed the entire purpose of the bill. And the entire purpose was greater transparency of these things, and it ended up being a paperwork bill and something that actually probably made it harder for the public to know these facts and the information. Comes out of conference committee, Dan Flynn comes to the floor. Dan Flynn says to them, "Oh, we didn't make any substantive changes, but I need to have this resolution in order to pass the bill." Nobody reads the resolution because it's just like that on all these things. Nobody reads the resolution. Resolution's adopted unanimously or maybe near unanimous. Bill passes unanimously or near unanimous. Nobody even knows. I didn't notice it for another year or so afterwards. I wrote a thing and I said that Dan Flynn should be censured and removed from the House over that. I mean, how do you can't, the process has so few safeguards on it. The only way you can actually trust anything is if you trust that the guy at the microphone is not lying to you. So to the extent he comes forward and says, "We didn't make substantive changes," or we didn't really do much, and it's actually major changes to the bill, not acceptable. So that's one example, and it happens frequently. David Simpson point of ordered a bill that they didn't even offer the out of bounds resolution. They just brought the bill up, and they had come in and, well, actually, no, that's slightly different. That's another thing to watch for on the final day. The final day is more or less reserved for these corrective amendments. So let's say there's typos in a bill or some grammatical error or something like that. On the last day, they will pass resolutions to correct grammatical errors and typos. You'll be surprised what gets considered to be a grammatical error or a typo. Sometimes they accidentally didn't type NASCAR into the bill. That was oops. We didn't include NASCAR. I mean, it was substantive. It was stuff like that. There was some deal, and I think it actually had to do with that retroactive law that was passed this session. We talked about earlier this session. It had NASCAR and like some EA Sports stuff or ESPN. I can't remember if it was exactly that, but I think it may have had some connection because it was something similar. Simpson point of ordered it, but if you weren't reading those resolutions on that final day, and again they're coming through, I mean there's short notice periods on all this stuff. So if nobody's reading them, there's just no way to catch it, and there's no way for one person to read it. There's no way for one member to read it all. Maybe with all their staff, they get them all read. But we're now in an era where we have some members who actually care enough to put the work in those final hours rather than just going out and partying like the rest of them. But at one point in time, nobody even did that. There was nobody who was even trying to be engaged.
Following up on your Flynn example, if we run across a case this session where it appears similar, what do you do? What can we do?
Tell me. I mean,
you said you filed a case for censure. What happened?
Well, I didn't file it. I wrote a story about it. I said the appropriate thing.
You filed a story.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, all I knew was I'm not in there, so I can write about it. But yeah, come talk to me if you see something fishy in these final days. Do not assume that other people have caught it and are aware. Please do talk to me or talk to your representative if they're
not involved.
Well, yeah, sometimes it's not very good. Talk to a conservative, call Stickland's office.
Call Stickland.
Call David Simpson is a great resource on this. I know he would welcome input in the process because this is something he's been passionate about, even more so than Jonathan or any others. And so, talk to one of those good guys who are doing the good work, or come talk to me and I'll try and help you out and figure out what might be done. At the end of the day, the least we can do is write about it, tweet about it, put it out there, and let people know what's going on. And that way, members can't claim, I just didn't know. Well, if we make you know, then you know. So
they had a case in Arkansas. Maybe you know this a few years ago. They meant to raise the marriage age because it was quite low in Arkansas. Somehow they eliminated a minimum age. And the whole legislature was out. They had to call a special session. Everybody had to come back in because they were afraid pedophiles were going to bring children in and marry them. And it went through, it got signed off on by everybody, and the session was out.
The, wow, not this last session, but 2011, between 2011 and 2013, you actually did not have to have a license plate on your car in the state of Texas.
Yeah.
The law said you had to have a license plate, but there was no penalty for not having a license plate on your car. And it kind of slowly came out, and then there were some people who took advantage of it throughout, I guess that would have been 2012. And the cops were very confused because they wanted to stop people for license plate stuff, but there's some interesting legal situation where they wanted to stop people for not having a license plate, but then there was no penalty for it. And they fixed it in 13. So.
Have you heard anything about this, you know anything about the American Phoenix Foundation?
Mm-hmm.
And they've got like 800 hours of tape
Yeah.
that they're gonna release after the session?
So that news broke. I don't know if y'all follow that story at all.
Hannah Giles.
Well, so Hannah Giles was involved with
Acorn.
James O'Keefe and the Acorn
Oh, right.
video bus, and so she actually lives here in Austin now. Met her before, her husband, and Joe Basil, who was kind of behind the scenes on that thing, is one of James' friends. They've gotten married and live here in Austin. And so news broke a little bit ago, and apparently they did not intend for it to be out, but I guess you take what comes. They had been going around hidden camera, interviewing people, talking to people for all
800
session.
hours.
Yeah. So we'll see. I mean, and then what's funny, Michael tweeted about it and said, "Look, I bet you there's a lot of nervous introspection going on in the ledge."
And it's both sides, it's not.
Yeah, no, it's anybody. Look, it's the end of the day. I tell people a lot of times, the best thing in life I have is a clear conscience. It's not that I'm proud of everything I've ever done, but I at least I can just apologize for it, or I guess that was bad. I shouldn't have done
Go to
that.
court over it?
Yeah, I don't have to worry about it. I mean, now granted, they might throw me into court over it, but there's nothing wrong with that. That's just them trying to abuse you for doing good. Becker?
Yes, I've just been a quiet observer and trying to learn as just a little common citizen, but
You're an extraordinary citizen.
I was going to say, you speak a very powerful word of conscience, and is that not even relevant anymore? Because it seems that what you say and what I hear going on, that people don't have, that there's a lot that are absent of one. And they just act according to whatever they want to do. And don't they, I know there's people that don't believe in God and so forth, the arbiter, this building over here says the arbiter of destinies of all nations. That's God, right?
Right.
So where is that in all of this? Like answering to God?
God is in control of all of these things, so rest assured of that. But
I think he does.
there is a significant portion of people who, some people come down here well-meaning and get this, kind of get off the rails, and they probably have a lot weighing on their conscience. Other people don't realize what they're doing is wrong. So, obviously cheat on your wife or husband or whatever, that's pretty obvious, it's wrong, conscience is there. But to the extent you cheat on your voters,
Yeah.
some people even forget the promises that they made. There's some of that. There's other people who just follow along and allow it to happen. And there are other people who are doing good. So it is a mix.
Can I add something to that?
Yeah.
As a minister, I say that we get what we got because that's who we voted in. Israel wanted a king, so God gave them Saul. They wanted Saul, so that's what they got. So as believers, we should be voting and being down here making these changes.
Right.
There is a saying, I was talking to an old Democrat the other day, and this is something we both agreed on. It was from time to time, you would say, Texans have a much better government than they deserve. And it's because Texans, and I've had people move here to this state and tell me that they are shocked at how disengaged the public is. To some extent, we have a better government than we deserve. We deserve to have a corrupt government, given that we have people who are not engaged in the process. And ultimately, that's right. You know, this country is not built to have a central government that runs everything, and we're going to elect some brilliant people who are going to run everything. What you need is a community that is organized and engaged and takes care of its own problems. And ultimately, that'll, you know, the government will follow a structured, organized community. And so, to some extent, a lot of our solutions are not solutions fixing government. They're not even electoral solutions. They're community solutions. The solutions about fixing some decay that is going on in our society generally. And as conservatives, sometimes the left understands that really well. There's entire organizations that you would characterize as political. They don't do anything having to do with elections, but they're moving the ball in a very negative direction culturally. And we don't do enough, or churches I don't think are engaged enough, and our community organizations engaged enough to try and correct in a positive direction a culture that has some problems. So, Dustin is an imposing figure.